All right, thank you so much. Our next session is by the VRQA, thank you very much for coming down on a big road trip. So we have Julia Florence and Danny Garcia presenting to us around the role of VRQA. There's too many acronyms. TLAs, three-letter acronyms. Who'd want more of those? Yeah, anyway. So they're going to talk to us about RTOs, about competencies, a whole range of other acronyms because we don't have enough, and some of the legalities around that sort of stuff, particularly around compliance and what you need to be thinking about. So thank you very much. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm Julie, obviously. Look, we're going to be talking about some fairly basic concepts. So some of you may be very familiar with them, so apologies for that. But for those who aren't, hopefully they're a bit helpful. So our brief was unpacking a training package product. So hopefully it won't be too basic for those of you who've been in the vet sector for a long time. And this will be probably more about the RTO perspective, because you're working with RTOs, so understanding perhaps where they're coming from. I'm going to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet as well. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. The important thing to know about the vet sector in Australia, and this is very fundamental, is that there are 3 vet regulators currently. The largest is ASQA, Australian Skills Quality Authority. They are the national regulator. They have been the national regulator since 2011, when the Commonwealth legislation was established, and all the states and territories were meant to refer their powers to ASQA. Western Australia and Victoria did not, so that's why those 2 regulators remain. The actual standards that the ASQA uses are the standards for registered training organisations, and Western Australia has also adopted those. Victoria still uses the old AQTF standards, but we have the VRQA guidelines, and we use those to plug the gaps between the old AQTF and the updated standards for RTOs. And some of you may or may not be aware, those standards are changing next year. So I think 1 January 2025, new standards will be in place. So while you may not be directly affected if you're not an RTO, the RTOs you're working with most likely will be. And I gather that most of you are working with ASQA RTOs, and all the TAFEs are regulated by ASQA as well. Okay, training, nationally recognised training. So we were asked to talk about training package products and accredited courses. They are all both nationally recognised. So it's not that one is recognised and the other isn't. They all come under the banner of nationally recognised training. Training package products are created by job skills councils. They came on about a year ago from the old skills organisations. They are appointed by the government, and all of their decisions are also approved by the state and territory training ministers as well. The details of all training packages, you probably know this, can be found on tgatraining.gov.au. And that's also set for changes as well. That's going to change its format coming up probably in another year or so. Accredited courses are really there to plug the gaps where there are training or industry needs that the training package products aren't actually covering. So in that sense, they're kind of temporary. They will be in place until the training package products, decide to develop those courses. So it's really important if you are delivering accredited courses that you make sure that you're delivering ones that are actually current. And you can find those on TGA as well, but you won't be able to find the detail. You'll need to go to the course owner. And if it's, say, the Victorian government, they'll all be published, all the structure and unit detail will be published on the website. Otherwise, if it's a private owner, you'll need to apply to them directly, but you'll be able to get that information on TGA. So I've just given you some examples of accredited courses, just so that you can see that they do look slightly different. You'll be able to recognise ASQA accredited courses. They have the NAT for national as part of their code. VRQA has VIC and VU for its units, and Western Australia has WA. Now, I haven't put a unit for WA because they don't use a similar pattern to ASQA and Victoria. So they've got about four letters that are based on the course itself, and so they're a little bit more random. So if you do come across a unit with a very random set of letters that is obviously not a training package, it's probably a Western Australian unit, but you probably won't come across very many of those. So still on the qualification level, looking at a training package, a qualification, and all the different components of that. Once again, apologies if this is too basic. It's always a good idea to use the full code whenever you're referring to a qualification, because there are different versions, and people often have to know which version you're delivering or talking about, for that matter. So it's a good idea to include the code. So in this case, we're looking at the SIT 30622, Certificate 3 in Hospitality. And the SIT is the training package, the Tourism, Travel and Hospitality training package. Training packages always consist of 3 letters, and there are currently 54 training packages on TGA that are current. Older versions will have a year of release, perhaps, but they're phasing those out now. 3 is the AQF level. That's the qualification level, so Certificate 3. And the sequence number is 06, and the 22 refers to the year of delivery. So you should be able to tell at a glance from the code what level it is and what year it was released. And of course, the training package that it came from. Now, the packaging rules are also at the qualification level, and these are mandatory, so these must be followed. So if an RTO, for example, is only offering 14, if they're doing hospitality and they're only offering 14 units, then that's not a valid certificate, and it has to be 15. But it also has to be 15 with all the 6 core units included, and those core units can't be swapped out for others. So they're absolutely set in stone for that qualification. You've got 9 electives units that must be done, and it's prescriptive as to what they must be. So 1 unit from Group A, 6 units from Group B, and 2 units from basically anywhere else. This Certificate 3 in Hospitality has 87 electives listed, so an RTO can't possibly be expected to deliver all of those. So which ones they deliver are really going to be a matter of industry consultation or what students need, or perhaps in consultation with LENZ, what you feel that the area needs. So those 87 listed electives are what we call implicit scope, so that the RTO can change its electives anytime it wants to, and it doesn't have to ask the regulator for permission to change that, because once it has the qualification on scope, it's ready to go with those. It often happens that students, for whatever reason, don't want to do the whole qualification anymore. So the demand is for, say, 3 or 4 units. An RTO can just deliver 3 or 4 units as implicit scope, if they're implicit scope. If they're imported, the RTO will have to put them on scope first before it can deliver them as standalone. So while it's fairly flexible, it's not flexible in terms of imported scope. So moving on to the unit level now, the unit details are all on TGA, but if you want to print them off, they're in 2 sections. So the unit itself has the unit descriptor, has the elements and performance criteria, has prerequisite units if there are any, the application, foundation skills. The prerequisite units must be done before the unit. They can't be done concurrently and they can't be done after. So that delivery sequence is really important. Foundation skills are also important. They're, reading, numeracy, oral communication, etc. The unit lists what will be needed in order to undertake the unit, but they're not explicitly put into the elements and performance criteria. So you need to check that carefully. The assessment criteria or assessment requirements are the other document, and the knowledge evidence, performance evidence are listed there, as well as the assessment conditions, but you need to factor in the elements and performance criteria into that as well. So the assessment requirements aren't really a complete document. And if you read the text, it will usually say that the elements and performance criteria must also be undertaken in the assessment. But it's easy for people to actually leave those out because they're just looking at the assessment requirement document. So those elements, performance criteria, performance evidence, knowledge evidence, and assessment conditions need to be considered together to create valid assessment. It's usually a good idea to sort of map performance evidence and knowledge evidence against the performance elements elements and performance criteria, so you get a complete picture of what the unit is really all about. So they must be included in the assessment, and competency-based assessment is about the student being able to know and do consistently across all of those elements. So traditionally, VET is not about scoring, scored assessment. It's important for schoolwork. If people want their VCE, vocational major score certificate, then obviously they need to have the scored assessment. But VET traditionally is competent or not yet competent in its outcome. And that may be why a lot of RTOs aren't ready and able to get on board with scored assessment, because competency-based assessment is what they do. So that's important to understand as well. Assessment methods must suit what you're actually assessing. So performance evidence really needs to be undertaking a task, or it could be a role play, for example. Whereas if you're assessing knowledge, then question and answer, short answers are fine. But you can't have an assessment task that is for, say, a performance task such as making coffee, for example. You couldn't have a student talk about making coffee or write about making it and have that as them competent in making coffee. The assessment would need to include them actually making the coffee. So that's what we mean by competency-based assessment. Assessment instruments should also have marking criteria. So you might hear your RTOs perhaps talking about that. It's simply a little bit like a marking rubric in a way where everyone has an agreement on what a satisfactory outcome looks like. So, you know, answers will vary, and that's often included in the assessment task. And the problem is that the answers will vary. So you need consistent, reliable outcomes when you're assessing. So you need some kind of guide as to what's acceptable, what's a satisfactory outcome and what isn't. And the task level will be satisfactory, not satisfactory, and the unit overall will be competent or not yet competent. So that's in, you know, straight out vet land, not accounting for scored assessment. The other important aspect to RTOs is the training and assessment strategy. And this is really a roadmap or a source book for how the RTO is going to deliver the qualification or the unit. It should be viewed as a live document. So obviously things change over time. So while RTOs are required to have a TAS, they really should be not just writing it and putting it in a drawer and forgetting about it, but they should be updating it as things change. So it needs to include, you know, who they're delivering to, who the learners are, needs to include the amount of training, and we'll talk about that in a second. So it's basically, you know, how you're breaking down the training hours. The core and elective units need to be identified. Is the delivery going to be a cluster of units, or is it going to be, you know, unit by unit? Is there any third-party delivery? So that's important to note. The mode of delivery, is it going to be all workplace-based? Is it going to be in the classroom? Is it going to be a blend? Is it going to be online? So that needs to be noted. Methods of assessment need to be set down, and they really should match the assessment tools that are being used. You should list equipment and facilities. Industry consultation needs to be included. So not just who you've spoken to, but what you've learned, what you've taken on board from industry, and you know, how you're going to incorporate that into your delivery. The TAS should include trainers and assessors and their qualifications, and any other requirements, such as some RTOs with a funding contract. The funding contract may have particular requirements as well, or anything else. If they were, say, partnering with a LEN, they would also, you know, any requirements that you have. So volume of learning, oh, sorry. Where are we up to? I've gone to the end. Assessment strategy.
We might have accidentally put your slides the wrong way.
Oh, right, okay. I can't quite read that. Oh, right, okay, so we've left off volume of learning. I'll see if I can find it then. Yep. Third party? No. Volume of learning, okay, found it. It's a weird angle when you're looking this way. So volume of learning, it's amount of training is the most useful thing to an RTO, and probably the most useful thing for the student and for you to know about. But volume of learning comes from the Australian Qualifications Framework, or the AQF. It's a very broad range of hours, so it's not really it's not really the most useful thing when you're looking at an RTO's delivery. Nominal hours are usually what comes from the Victorian Purchasing Guide, and they're often described as a payable hours, although they are also the hours that a beginner would be expected to need to become competent. So they're not just about payable hours. So, so they are a useful guide, and some scored assessment will have particular hours assigned to it as well. But the amount of training is what the RTO really must work out, because this is a requirement of the standards. So the RTO determines this. So how much student time is spent in the classroom, trainer-led, with supported by the trainer. So obviously, the more hours with the trainer, the more support there is. Self-directed study, the more hours you have of those, the less support there is, and it requires high levels of discipline on the student's part. It requires a lot of literacy, so it's not suitable for all cohorts. How much time you're spending assessing, how much work placement time is there. So all of these things need to be worked out based on who you're delivering to. Let's see if we can. Okay, so the fundamentals here is that learners need time to develop skills and knowledge before they're assessed. So that's why this volume of learning is so critical for the RTO to work out. Basically, because it's competency-based, you shouldn't be doing assessment, say, in the first week or two of the beginning of the course, because there couldn't possibly be time for the student to have learned or developed much in that time frame. And they also need to be able to do things consistently. So while they might be able to remember something from yesterday, that's not really the same thing as knowing it in 2 weeks' time. So competency is meant to build up slowly. So an RTO needs to factor in the learner cohort, the qualification or unit requirements, that there'll be different breadth and depth of knowledge and skill required across different units. And your mode of delivery really fits in with that as well. So different mixes will work better for different people. And child-safe standards. Now, Danny was going to talk about those, but so I'll hand you over to Danny, but they may be a tad.
I saw some of the other slides in there, so I'll just bounce around maybe.
Bounce around a little.
Cool. Sorry. Ah. I broke it.
And that's it. How far back do you want to go?
Yeah, that way.
The bottom one's back, middle one's up, forward.
Cool. Transition. Yes, this looks good. Okay, so transition periods, I suppose one of the responsibilities that an RTO has is transitioning from an old version of a course to a new course. So when a course is superseded, or if there's a new accredited course released, the RTO has a responsibility under the AQTF, and I think under the national standards as well, generally speaking, within 12 months to transition to the new version of the course. That sort of 12-month period where you have the new version and the superseded version both sort of current is called the transition period. And they're sort of both operating at the same time, depending on how ready an RTO is to transition its students and I guess all of the other work that goes underneath it. So it is the RTO's responsibility to pay attention to, the industries and the training package releases and make sure that they're on top of it. The process takes time, I guess. It can take a lot of work for an RTO to transition a new course. It involves, applications to add items to the scope of registration so they can have the new version on there. It involves informing any students about transition arrangements, how it might affect them. And then it's also developing resources for the new course. So they'll have to develop, obviously, new assessment tools, new training and assessment strategy, things like that. Am I talking to the thing? I think from the VRQA's perspective, when it comes to transitioning students, what's really important is that the student isn't disadvantaged. So sometimes when a new course is released, it can add core units or change the length of the course, add total units, things like that. So if a student is virtually finished with the superseded version, sometimes it's better for them to just complete the old version. Sometimes it's better to transition a student to the new version so that they can come out with the most current version of the qualification. So that's sort of what the VRQA would be looking at when we audit an RTO and look at their transition arrangements. Once the transition period has ended, students cannot be enrolled into a superseded course. I will say that one of the differences between VRQA and ASQA RTOs is that ASQA, as I understand it, I think has like a 1 or 2 year teach out period. So the students receiving training in superseded courses must be finished within 1 or 2 years of the course being superseded. The VRQA doesn't have that rule. So there's no sort of formal end to a teach out period. The RTO can continue delivering a superseded course as long as it makes sense for the student and it's not disadvantaging them. So that's something to keep in mind. Accredited courses expire. They don't have transition periods, but like superseded training package courses, if a student's enrolled in it and it's expired, the RTO can continue to teach it out until it's finished and then just enroll any new students in the new version of the accredited course. Not yet, maybe soon. I could just talk about them. How do I go backwards? This one?
No, that's forwards.
Yeah, he wants to.
Oh, I am going backwards. Sorry. I don't know where I'm going. Backwards again, sorry.
If you follow the number on the bottom right of the screen.
Ah, thank you, yes.
But they don't match our order though.
All right. I'll talk about, there we go. Third-party arrangements. So a third-party arrangement is when an RTO has a formal agreement with another organization that's going to be delivering some of its RTO services on its behalf. It sounds like a lot of the LENs have third-party arrangements, maybe with RTOs in some cases, based on what I heard today. But basically, if any organization is providing a service that an RTO would normally provide, it's likely a third-party arrangement. So this can be any recruitment, training assessment, student support services. So if you're doing any of that stuff and you're not an RTO, but you're doing it for an RTO, you're probably in a third-party arrangement. Rules for us are that, look, there needs to be a formal arrangement in place. It needs to outline the responsibilities of each party, and the third party needs to know that it has to cooperate with the regulator if required. The RTO also must notify a regulator within 30 days of either entering a third-party agreement or ending one. I think the key message is that the compliance burden always remains with the RTO. So if someone is doing marketing on behalf of an RTO, it's the RTO's responsibility to ensure that the marketing materials that go out are accurate and up to date and, are actually good. It's not really the responsibility of the third party. There should be monitoring arrangements in place so the RTO knows that its third parties are doing the right thing. Yes, and third-party arrangements should be made aware to students and people like that. Wrong way. Dang it.
Child safety.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about SBATs real quick. Sorry. All right. So apprentice and trainees obviously are enrolled at RTOs for their training. They sign up now through Apprentice Connect Australia providers. This just changed from ASINs, I don't even know what that acronym is. It's important that apprentices and trainees have a job that reflects the qualification. So they need to be doing the skills that they must acquire as part of their course. I suppose SBATs are a type, I guess, of apprenticeship or traineeship in that they must be endorsed by the school they're attending. They're sort of folded into the requirements of the SBAT are folded into the school work requirements. And they can only undertake qualifications that are approved for SBATs. There's an important note on the bottom that if the school doesn't endorse the contract, the training contract, the student won't be formally an SBAT. They go as part-time attending school. It needs to be sort of converted over. So it's important that the school endorses the contract and integrates it into the schoolwork, because otherwise it's not an SBAT. And it's harder to integrate into their school studies. Yes, okay. So this is the last thing, sorry, y'all. Child safe standards, look, they've been around for a while, but for the purposes of RTOs, they became a condition of registration from 1 January last year, which means that now whenever an RTO is audited for initial registration, re-registration, any kind of compliance audit, we can or will look at their compliance with the child safe standards as long as they deliver to students or intend to deliver to students that are under 18 years of age. And what it means that it's sort of a condition of registration, it means that we can use our, I guess, regulatory tools to, I don't know, we can put restrictions on them or things like that if they're not compliant with the child safe standards when they need to be. Oh, there was one more slide. In here, when we send the slides out, there will be, there you go. These are a list of the 11 child safe standards. An RTO that needs to be compliant with them needs to be compliant with all of them. It's pretty important for the VRQA. We take this pretty seriously. We're sort of transitioning from sort of the, I guess, training and helping phase with RTOs into sort of a more normal compliance phase when it comes to child safe standards. There are heaps of really good resources at the CCYP website. The Commission for Children and Young People have really great resources. Yeah, I think that might be all we want to say. There we go. We're a really small team at the VRQA. It's me, Julie, a couple of other people. So if anyone has any questions, y'all can send us emails. They'll come to us. We will respond. Thank you.
Before you sit down, we'll just, any questions? Again, lots and lots of information. Ev?
Thank you. Well done. There's a whole lot of detail in there, and it's good to have it all laid out really quite logically, which is really appreciated. Thank you. That's all right. No, I followed along. It was fine. And having been a TAFE teacher as well as a classroom teacher in mainstream, it was good to see some of that stuff actually there. Why is Victoria different is my question. What is it that we don't understand about why Victoria won't align with the rest of the world?
Good question.
Well, it's because Victoria always intended to align with the rest of the world, and for the last I've been with the VRQA since 2010, so basically since 2012 up till now, we've been expecting to be referred to the Commonwealth, and it's just never happened. I think it was going to happen just before COVID hit, and that threw everything into disarray. I guess at some point something will happen. VRQA has 126 RTOs registered with it at the moment, so it's very small. So who knows?
The VRQA also do a whole range of other things for schools.
Oh yeah,
and stuff as
that's
well.
right. We don't just regulate
Yeah.
VETs.
There was a discussion maybe 12 months ago that the RTO component would actually move to TAFEs, I think, and that they would be the regulatory body. I don't know whether that was true.
Yeah, well,
I guess that then that leads to my next question is when it does go nationally, like what's that impact on students? Because this is stuff that they wouldn't even be aware of is happening. Obviously we, in this space, the adults have to work this out. But if it's going to change over, what's the impact for them?
I don't think the impact will be too great. I mean, one of the things that we do with our VRQA guidelines is to make sure that the standards are fairly consistent. The new standards that are coming in are closer to the AQTF than the old ones, which is interesting. And I think we try to keep the three regulators work closely together to harmonise as well. And I think it will be probably quite a smooth transition. Yeah.
The students shouldn't even know who the regulatory body is unless they need
they'll
them.
know, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a question from the bottom one. Are there any plans to have a universal census date for VET in schools, for example, 4 weeks after the start date? Probably not a question for you.
No.
It's probably more a question for each of the LEN clusters to say, are we going to have an agreed date? For the Southeast cluster, ours is for end of week 4 of the term, so just coming up to school census date, and kids can make any movements that they like without any financial burden to the schools. Is that sort of our general policy stuff? Any other questions? We've still got Loretta here as well if you've been stewing on a VCAA question or a VRQA question as well. No? Anything else from the online crew? Thank you so much for making the effort to drive down. I do apologise for the order of the slides.